Chapter 7 of Glass Houses. She climbed to the top of the building, looking for a door ajar. However, she was forced back down the slippery stairs. She was going to have to take a chance on the sound that lowering the ladder was bound to make. It was better than getting caught on the fire escape by Korak. The rain had stopped, and the sounds reverberated in the alley. The ladder made an awful racket, positively echoing, no matter how hard she tried to do it quietly, but she incredibly reached the pavement of the alley without, as far as she could see, drawing any attention to herself whatever. She had to walk right by his car. It was like walking right by something sleeping, some presence, some monster in the night. Then she continued hurriedly down the alley towards Griffith Street, rather than to Tucker, crossed it in the middle, and picked up another alley, which she followed until she got to Joe's, a neighborhood bar. She was awfully glad to get inside, but she didn't order herself a drink. No, none of that. Not now. She needed to keep her wits about her. Drink had gotten her into too much trouble today already. The thought of a drink made her slightly nauseous. Besides, her hair was wet from the shower and plastered to one side of her head. Her clothes were clammy, and she couldn't wait to get them off. The bar was dark and lonely. The two men who sat in it, spaced apart for serious drinking, seemed sharply aware of her, but didn't say anything. Neither did Joe. Had she made a scene in here last night? Last night? The ladies' room was an inadequate, boxy little place, about 3 feet square, with a tiny, dirty mirror and a dirty ring around a bar of soap. But it was soap, and the water was hot, thank God. She stripped off her wet clothes and carefully unwound the clean ones that Korak had picked out for her from her middle. Why had he given her the pink suit? It showed every spot. It was going to be possible to camouflage the scrapes on her hands and knees, as the skirt was midi length, and she could explain looking a little bedraggled after being caught out in the rain. But what worried her was the bruise emerging on her cheek. It would show terribly, even through her makeup. She hunched close to the mirror to work on her eyes, carefully, meticulously. They would draw attention away from the swollen cheek. False eyelashes salvaged out of the bottom of her purse, and lots of liner, like an Egyptian priestess. Her eyes were a little bloodshot, no wonder, but the large black pupils were lined with the white ring blue-eyed people sometimes get when they're excited. That made thick black around the lashes, white, sort of, around the blue ring of her irises, then a blinding white ring, and inside that, velvet black again. Such beautiful eyes to die. She wouldn't be able to wear her coat. She would carry it over her arm and try to avoid the rain. Her wet clothes were ruined, of course, but she wrapped them in a bundle to take with her anyway. You never knew. It might be possible to salvage something. The dress had cost her $80 on sale at Lord & Taylor's. When she was finished, she appraised herself morosely. She was, in spite of her precautions, rumpled, wrinkled, a little spotted, bedraggled, and over-made up. She looked like a hustler who'd just been in a fight. Well, it couldn't be helped. Next, she had to call Jason. There really wasn't any way to put it off longer. She shouldn't have put it off at all. The telephone was back near the ladies' room. There wasn't a booth, but the jukebox was on, and that would muffle her voice. Besides, the bar was nearly empty, and nobody had come in while she was in the restroom. She located Jason at the grotto. "Jason," she said, "I don't know what's going on, but somebody seems to have gotten wind of peace." There was a long silence. "Who?" he said at last. "I don't know, but a lot of strange things have been happening." "All right, calm down. Start at the beginning. Are you at a secure phone?" "No, it's a pay phone." "Okay, watch what you say." "You see, somebody started shooting at me." "Shooting? Or at least that's what I thought." "Shooting with a gun, Marilyn?" "I don't know. I don't even know if anybody was shooting at all. But if they were, I guess it would be with a gun." "Step by step, Marilyn." "You see, I fell down, and I saw this little thing bounce off a fire plug, and I thought it was a bullet, but it wasn't, so that's why I thought somebody was shooting at me." Another silence. "I see. And what about the police? What did they have to say about it?" "I didn't call the police because, you know, I thought I'd better call you first." "Well, did you get a look at who it was?" "No, I mean, for all I know, it didn't really happen. I mean, I might have just fallen down and thought somebody was shooting at me." "I see. Is that all?" "Oh, no, that's only the beginning, Jason. See, when I thought somebody was shooting at me, I ran away, and I couldn't find anybody to help me, but finally I saw this man. He was sitting in a parked car down the block. So I came up to him, and I told him I thought I was being shot at. And so he took me in his car, and we drove around the block until he was sure nobody was following us, and then he took me into the building the back way." "Wait a minute, Marilyn, slow down. Which building?" "My apartment. And then he was very careful, like he thought there really was somebody shooting, even though I told him it was a mistake, because I was jumpy after losing the transcript and all. I mean, I didn't tell him that, but that's why I was jumpy. And he punched all the buttons on the elevator, and we got off at the wrong floor and walked up, and then he searched my room to make sure nobody was there." "Who was this guy?" "I don't know, Jason. That's a problem." "Who did he say he was?" "He said he was Korak, and I think he's a spy, and so that's why I ran away." "You ran away?" "Yes, I was supposed to be taking a bath, and I climbed out the window, and never mind." A long silence. "You were supposed to be taking a bath." "Jesus, it's not what you think, Jason. I mean, it was a very natural. I mean, I had fallen down in a puddle, and I was all wet and muddy. I mean, you wouldn't believe how muddy." "Okay, Marilyn, where is this joker now?" "I think he's still up in my room." "Up in your room?" "Jason, I'm sure he's a spy. He had a little machine to test for booby traps." What did it look like?" "It was a little black box, and he knew my nickname." "Your nickname?" "Potsy. Jason, nobody's called me that since I left Casper." "Potsy? They used to call you Potsy?" He laughed. "Jason, you don't understand. How could he have known that if he wasn't a spy? And he was so scary looking." "Scary looking, was he?" "Jason, okay, let's get this straight. You ran up to some man on the street and told him you were being shot at, and he rescued you and took you home, and you slipped out the bathroom window because he was scary looking. Is that right so far?" "Jason, you don't understand." "Okay, Marilyn, look. Call the police and ask them to get him out of your apartment for you." "I thought maybe you'd send somebody from security." A sharp sigh. "All right, somebody from security. And if you're scared to go back, maybe you can sleep over with one of your girlfriends. She was aware that her voice was too high and thin. I thought maybe I could sleep at the grotto tonight. Marilyn, we're busy over here. We don't have time for your little games. I mean, on one of the couches in the lounge. Go to a hotel then, if you don't want to stay over with somebody else. But no, definitely not at the grotto. I don't want to sound unsympathetic, Marilyn, but I've had a rough day. Okay, thank you, Jason. She hung up carefully. Then she called a cab. But as she was climbing in, a big, fast car slid like a shark past her and, catching itself, came to a screeching U-turn at the next corner. Step on it, she said to the cabbie. She felt like someone in a movie. The cab driver turned slowly in his seat and stared at her, his flat, laconic eyes passing over her wet hair, her pink suit, and settling on her bruised cheek. Downtown, she cried, stumbling over her words in her haste. With shaking fingers, she pulled a $5 bill out of her purse and gave it to him, and then another. He turned instantly, and jamming his foot on the accelerator, sped away just as the big car approached. The two hurtled side by side for a moment until the dark machine, a pursuer, was forced behind by a truck parked in the street. She hadn't dared to look in the car to see who was driving it. She felt its headlights on the back of her head and wished she had. What had she had to lose? Actually, driver, I think that car behind us is following me. What you say, miss? That car behind, I think they're following me. Do you think you could lose him? I don't want no tickets, miss. I'll pay for your ticket. You pay for my ticket? She took another 10 out of her purse and handed it up to him. Okay, miss, but that won't pay for no ticket. With that, he swung sharply into an alley and out another that intersected with it in an L-shaped pattern. Then he sped up one street, down another, in a breathtaking display of chasemanship. That your husband after you? Why not? Yes. Okay, this'll get him. He executed a maneuver that she couldn't follow because her eyes were shut. However, it swung her around for some time. Her teeth were clamped so tightly shut with tension that she could feel her jaw muscles stand out of her face. Stop that! Pull yourself together! On Pennsylvania Avenue, she found herself stopped at a light, and looking out the window, she saw another cab, pointing the opposite direction, right across the island, also stopped. What an opportunity! She had seen this done in a movie. This was the way to lose a tail. She paid the driver another $3 and stepped out of the cab, climbing into the one opposite, to both drivers' astonishment. To the Crawford. Then she sat back, embarrassed. The driver was silent. He was probably afraid of her. He probably thought she had just robbed a liquor store or something. I'm having a fight with my husband, she said. But it didn't help. She opened her wallet and counted her money. She had only $16 left. I take it back about the Crawford. I need a good cheap hotel. The driver didn't look at her. How cheap? Oh, maybe. How cheap can you get one? $5, but you wouldn't want to stay there. Good, take me to the $5 one. You're the boss. The street was dirty, loud with bars. The hotel was called the J&J. It had no lobby, but once inside you went 3 or 4 steps down, turned a corner, and were confronted with a cubicle with a window that served as a front desk. No one was behind the window. As she stood waiting, she could see further down the hall 2 men standing outside an open door. Aw, come on, Thelma. one of them was saying. He's the desk clerk, Marilyn thought, and he was. When he saw her, he came quickly up to her and looked her up and down. "What do you want, sweetheart?" he said. "I'd like a room if you've got one," she said. "For all night?" Jesus. Yes. He looked at her for a long moment, his curiosity veiled behind drooping eyelids. "Okay, honey," he said, "that's $10. Surely that wasn't the real price. Besides the cabbie's word, there was a sign outside saying rooms $5 a night. In advance. She pulled a $10 bill out of her purse, and he took it with a slow, sensual motion, and without taking his eyes off her, reached his hand through the window to the board on which hung some scattered keys, felt for one, and extended it to her. "Nice room," he said. "You'll like that room." The room was not as depressing as she had feared. It was small and to the point, mostly bed. It was on the 9th floor, and the view out the window was unobstructed. It had stopped raining again, and the air was absolutely clean. The lights of the city shone in 1,000 sharp glitters. The bed was reasonably firm, though tipped, as though it were a craft on water. The sheets had been washed so many times they were soft like batiste. She pulled them back and saw that one had an old yellow stain, so light it was almost acceptable, but still clearly defined. Well, it was clean. Tell yourself it's coffee. No, it wasn't coffee. It wouldn't hurt her, but it was something personal. It was an individual who had bled here. It was as if she had looked in that person's drawer. The sheet was just as clean as if you couldn't see the spot, but she kept well away from that side of the bed anyway. She had no nightgown, of course. She usually slept in a nightgown. She felt a little vulnerable getting into bed naked, but she could hardly sleep in her clothes. Maybe it was the nightgown. Maybe it was the stain. Maybe it was the excitement of the day. Or maybe it was her hunger, which came back now after she was no longer anywhere near a restaurant. Or maybe it was some ancient protective sense emerging into use after 22 years of placid neglect, warning her. In any case, exhausted as she was, really dizzy as she was with fatigue, once she had lain herself flat on the bed, she instantly arrived at a state of wakefulness that would not leave her. She tried tensing her muscles and loosening them, and she tried a yoga position that Marcia had taught her, but it did no good at all. Her eyes were so heavy she could not keep them open, but she could not fall asleep. The muscles of her body were so tired she couldn't bring herself to move them to get up out of bed for the drink of water or the 10 push-ups that her mind told her might help. So she just lay there, her body numb and motionless, her mind alert as ever. It was maybe a long time before she heard the knock, or maybe it was a short time. She knew she wasn't being objective about time, but she was sure she hadn't fallen asleep. She was awake when she heard it, and it sounded clearly in the little room, though it was just a light tapping on the door. Tap, tap, tap. Maybe it's somebody else's door. Sometimes walls are thin and noises seem closer at night, but when it came again, it surely sounded like her door. Tap, tap, tap. She could even hear breathing on the other side of the door. She opened her eyes and saw 2 shadows like 2 feet under the door, and they moved as the tapping came again. Tap, tap, tap. Could anyone have followed her here? Impossible. Maybe it was the desk clerk. Well, he could wait until morning. It could be some man who had seen her come in and thought she might be a hustler. Whoever it was didn't have any business knocking now. They could just go away. So she lay still and pretended to herself that it was some drunk looking for a date and that he would go away if she didn't answer. But in her heart, she believed it was the killer who had tried to shoot her, and she was suddenly clear-headed enough to see how foolish she had been to work so hard hiding from Korak. Who would protect her now? The somebody at the door didn't go away. Instead, the knocks got steadily louder. The somebody would knock 3 or 4 times, wait 10 seconds, and knock again, politely, as if it were a messenger. But the knocks shortly became an impolite pounding that rattled the ashtray on the end table and cut into Marilyn's heart like a threat. Still, she kept quiet. She couldn't think of anything else to do. Besides, such a destructive sounding racket would surely draw the attention of her neighbors, if not the authorities. If it were her trying to sleep in the room next door, she would be poised, ready to call for help the moment the commotion got any worse. Surely there would be men on this floor less timid than she was. Surely they'd be rousing themselves out of their beds in a moment to see what the fuss was about. But in her heart, she knew she was alone here. This was a place where people minded their own business. She had an awful premonition that if she were to start screaming for help, no one in earshot would pay any attention to her except whoever it was that was trying to beat her door down. After an awfully long time, the intruder finally appeared to give up, but whoever it was didn't leave her door. She saw the shadows move restlessly, as if from foot to foot, but they hovered there, maybe waiting to ambush her when she opened the door to see if all was clear. At last another noise reached her, this one subtle, quiet, but much more frightening. It was a little scraping sound, as if someone were trying to pick the lock on her door. At that, Marilyn was moved out of her lethargy. She grabbed the phone by her bed. Why hadn't she thought of it before? And waited for the desk clerk to answer on the other end. Please be there. She jiggled the button to catch his attention, but he didn't answer. God! It was with a thrill of panic that she hadn't felt since she was a child that she suddenly thought of the safety chain on the door. Had she fastened it? Surely she'd fastened it. She couldn't remember. She couldn't see it without getting out of bed. She got up stealthily. She felt so unprotected that she pulled the sheet out and dragged it with her, half around her. A stupid thing to do because it made a light swish on the floor, and the scraping at the door stopped for a moment, as if the somebody was listening. She stood quiet, too, listening until the scraping resumed. Then she let the sheet drop and stepped nearer the door. It was unhooked. She had forgotten to hook it. Jesus! She stopped nearer the door until she could feel like an electric presence the figure on the other side of it, nearly touching. She moved her hand smoothly up and took the cold metal of the safety latch in her fingers, smoothly. Inside, even her organs were trembling, but her fingers moved smoothly. There was no noise as she fit the metal catch into its hole. Not a breath of noise. She held the catch with one hand and the chain with the other to keep it from rattling. She didn't need to slide it all the way back. When the door started to open, the catch would be pulled back. All she needed to do was to make sure it was hooked securely in its groove. There was the slightest click as she released her hold on the chain, And again the scraping in the lock stopped for a moment. She could hear the breathing on the other side of the door. She stood motionless and tried to swallow her own breathing. Tried to breathe so slowly that it was like the air seeping out under the door and seeping back in. Silent. Was this the way the Yeti felt? When the scraping started again, she moved back away from the door. What should she do? She picked up the phone again, but still there was no response. She needed to get some clothes on. She was grateful for the control she had managed while she was hooking the safety chain. Now that she was further away from the danger, relatively speaking, and was only trying to hook her skirt, her fingers shook so badly she was literally unable to manage it. Even pulling the zipper up was a job that seemed beyond her. She made no attempt to put on her underclothes, but managed to get her arms into the jacket and the skirt, more or less around her, and as she kept being granted time and more time, she went back to it again and finally got it hooked. The jacket buttoned. What to do? An idea began to emerge in her head, hiding somehow. But where? The room had no bath, not even a closet. The bed lay close to the floor. The window wasn't anywhere near a fire escape. She was trapped in here. Still, she managed to unknot her bundle of muddy clothes, a triumph with palsied hands, and begin to arrange them in the bed, using the pillow and the blankets to make up a sort of dummy. Would that fool anyone? Of course not. The pillows in this sort of place were flat and without fluff, and so were the blankets. It was a limp and unconvincing dummy. Still, she stuck a shoe sort of out of one end of it, and she pulled the coat sort of up in a bunch to look like maybe somebody asleep under it. Then she crouched on the other side of the bed. Something like a plan came into her mind. When the intruder got into the room, she would lift up her side of the bed and use it as a battering ram, pushing whoever it was into the door. It was a dream plan, something that could never work, and she knew it. It was like the plan she'd had of reaching the fire escape from her bathroom window by simply sticking her feet over to it. Something that added up in the imagination, but which lost its substance when you tried to do it. Not many intruders were going to allow themselves to be defeated by a bed being tipped up at them. Still, it was the only thing she could think of, and she decided to do it when the worst came to the worst. When? She kept the phone to her ear, but she had sort of lost hope of contacting help that way. At last the scraping stopped with a sudden click of triumph. There was a shocked silence for a moment on both sides of the door, and the door opened, stopped abruptly by the chain. Get the hell out of here! I've got a gun right here, and if you don't get out of here, I'm going to shoot. 1, 2, 3. Marilyn's voice was hoarse and strong, and sounded nothing whatever like any sound she had ever made before. It came out of her unbidden, with absolutely no forethought. She was astounded at the strength in it. There was again a silence, a hesitation, and the door was shoved firmly again against the chain. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The shadows left the doorway and returned after a moment. 7, 8. They left again. There was a long silence, and finally the two shadows crept back. 9. God, if you think I'm kidding, then just stand still, mister. The shadows left. She rushed to the door and listened, and she thought she could hear light steps hurrying down the hall. She shut the door and leaned against it for a moment, breathing heavily, as if she couldn't get enough air in her lungs now that the need to breathe quietly had passed, as if she couldn't release any of the air that was trapped in her chest. But she couldn't stay here. What if he came back? She had to get out of that room now that she had the chance. She unlatched the safety chain and opened the door ever so cautiously, peeking her head out no further than necessary to look up and down the hallway. No one was to be seen. She had mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, she was grateful not to be confronted with her assailant, but on the other hand, it made her feel a little isolated to see that all her racket had not even roused the curiosity of any of her neighbors. Maybe she was alone on this floor. Jesus. She stepped out in the hallway, cautiously, stealthily, pulling her door closed behind her. She heard the latch catch. Click. Dummy. But it was too late. She had locked herself out. Her purse was still in there, and her shoes, not to mention her underclothes. All she had with her out in that hostile hallway was her naked body and the 2 pieces of her pink suit that more or less covered her. Well, on the other hand, she'd gotten through it rather well for someone who was unused to battle. She would just have to move quickly away and think twice next time before she shut any doors behind her. She moved cautiously and quickly down the hall, her bare feet silent on the rug. On the one hand, she was afraid of staying in the hall for fear she'd be seen from the other end, and on the other hand, she was afraid to move into a new hallway for fear that her attacker would be waiting in it. She compromised by moving spasmodically, quickly, getting herself lost in the labyrinth of hallways. She stayed away from the elevator. The thought of an elevator door opening to expose the killer on the other side terrified her. I'll take my chances on the stairs, she thought, and she ran down 2 flights before the sound of someone else in the stairwell somewhere drove her on to the next floor. Again she dashed down hallways more or less at random, afraid to keep moving, afraid to stay put, unable to decide where to go. She saw no one. There were the distant, almost impersonal noises of people far away, as one sometimes hears in cheap hotels, but she couldn't decipher them. Finally she came to a hallway with something different, a door ajar. She was drawn to that door, tempted by it, but shy of it. The list of circumstances she might conceivably find prevailing in that accessible room was terrifying to contemplate. She could get herself in even worse trouble than she was in already. She could, for one thing, draw attention to herself. On the other hand, the exposure to the ends of the hall she suffered was beginning to wear on her strength as if it had been extreme cold. She was like a burrowing creature trapped above ground with no place to hide. The sound of elevator doors opening somewhere decided her. She rushed into the room without even looking back, much more frightened of what was behind than what was ahead. Little daggers pricking her in the spot between her shoulder blades that waited for the assault to hit her. It was an empty room. The sheets and blankets were stripped off the bed and lay in a pile on the floor. Did they have maids running around places like this at night, making the rooms? Well, she wasn't afraid of a maid. She pulled the safety chain closed behind her, having learned one lesson, and sat down on the bed to wait. But what was she waiting for? And for how long? She laid back experimentally on the bed. The buttons would poke into her, but it didn't smell bad. It smelled like cloth, not like people. An amateur killer. Someone who fumbled around picking locks, who was uncertain how to proceed. Someone she knew? Again, she shoved the thought away from her and let her mind soak instead into a flaw in the plaster, a fist-sized dent on the wall opposite that offered subtle shadows to soothe her tired blue eyes.